4th of January, 2025. No, 2026. That's right. You're one of those people who makes that mistake of writing the wrong year. Make sure you write 2026 from now on for this year. So, what is happening with Maduro, Venezuela, Iran, and Trump? Well, President Trump has obviously announced the capture of President Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela yesterday in that lightning fast operation carried out by U.S. forces, law enforcement, and military together to work hand in hand to get in to Venezuela extremely quickly. They suppressed electronics and all kinds of other radar and stuff like that, all kinds of communications within Venezuela. And then they went ahead and took out a number of targets very precisely. They didn't kill a single civilian in Venezuela. They didn't harm a single civilian in Venezuela. Not a single American personnel was harmed or killed. And even though one American helicopter was reportedly hit fairly badly, it managed to still get back, safely, and was not lost. So America didn't even lose a single piece of equipment, other than obviously the ordnance that they dropped on the targets, right, in Venezuela, including and kind of especially as a big middle finger to entire political ideology that has ruined Venezuela, the mausoleum/tomb of the former dictator of Venezuela, Chavez, who is entombed there in Caracas, and whose tomb went up in a blazing pillar of fire and smoke yesterday during the very quick operation that saw the Americans basically start the operation and finish it within something like 2 hours and 50 minutes. And the time on the ground was reportedly around a half hour tops, which makes it one of the very fastest military operations of this kind. Some people are calling it a war. It wasn't really a war, okay? It was a military and law enforcement joint operation. And yes, the personnel that captured Maduro and his wife and arrested them and brought them back to the U.S. were wearing DEA patches, or at least allegedly. And obviously that was partly to kind of humiliate Maduro and drive the point home that, yeah, American cops can take out the dictator of another country. You know, we don't necessarily need our military for that. But obviously the military was involved in this. It was just, kind of like a big PR kind of thing to do that. But, very effective, certainly. And now Maduro is in the U.S. He and his wife have already been indicted yesterday by the Southern District of New York in court for drug-related charges and other criminal activity. And he will be tried like a common criminal and probably end up spending the rest of his life in prison. I don't know exactly what will happen to his wife. Maybe she also will also face severe prison sentence. But I don't know. We'll see. Very often the wise, if they haven't been as deeply involved in the criminal stuff, will get off with a lighter sentence or even no time served, or very little time served in exchange for if she testifies against him or something like that. And you can say, well, that's not legal in America. Well, they're not Americans. So different rules apply to non-citizens, whether you like it or not. That's just how it goes. So that's one dictator down. And the funny thing is, there were all these protests yesterday following the whole capture of Maduro and his wife. And people on the left, exactly as I said they would, they were losing their minds. Their minds were left, melting down, and they were freaking out and screaming, "Free Maduro!" And of course, they're also saying, "Free Palestine!" There were people in Times Square in New York that I saw during a few moments I saw of a Nate Friedman live stream. If you don't know who Nate Friedman is, I'm sure you probably do, but check out Nate Friedman. Just look him up on YouTube. It's awesome. He's an awesome YouTuber, young man who goes around and exposes people who go to protests and shows what their ties are to the different organizations. Very often shows even how much they earn by being professional protesters. It's just crazy to manage the information he manages to uncover about these people. It does a great job. Definitely check him out and subscribe to his channel. Not like he needs any help from me to do that, but he does fine for himself on his channel at a very nice tick. But anyway, he was in Times Square doing what he often does, speaking to people, asking them, what are you here for? What are you protesting? What's your opinion? He's just asking, people what they think and what their opinions are. And of course, they expose themselves, right? So he loves talking to people like Communist Party of America type people, or pro-Palestine type people, or socialists, or whatever. And yesterday he was speaking with a bunch of people, obviously on the left, who were protesting against Maduro in Times Square. And there were people there who I guess had printed their signs about 10 hours earlier or 8 hours earlier, when American forces were still in Venezuela, dropping ordnance on the country. And even though they'd stopped, within a couple hours of that, there were still people in Times Square later that day holding up signs saying, "Stop bombing Venezuela now." America wasn't bombing Venezuela when those people were out there protesting with those signs, and they looked like complete jackasses, and it was really funny. They're like chanting for the liberation of a drug guy, like a guy running a drug cartel, right? And who was doing horrible things to the American public by basically enabling the drug cartels to move fentanyl and other horrible things from Venezuela to the United States. Whether you like him or not, Trump has made efforts to stop that, and has had some measure of success in reducing the number of illegal drugs coming from Venezuela to the U.S. Now, obviously, there's still illegal stuff coming to the U.S., but overall, there has been reportedly some kind of a dip in the amount of material arriving into the U.S. following the very publicly seen like banana boats being blown up, right, and other kind of vessels being stopped along their way to try to import their illegal stuff to the U.S. Now, again, of course, you can argue, well, fentanyl is actually produced by pharmaceutical companies, like, legally and all this stuff. Yeah, but they're still importing it illegally, and they're bringing in stuff that's made illegally to the U.S. So, arguably, they're doing a good thing by stopping those shipments, right? Not even arguably, they're doing a good thing, because the stuff that they're bringing in is absolutely horrifying and is responsible for the deaths of many, many people every year, like thousands and thousands of people every year, just in the U.S. alone. So, frankly, whether you like them or not, it's a good thing for the U.S. that stuff should be stopped. And yes, of course, getting Maduro out of power obviously had a lot to do with oil, which he himself expressed, right? Trump himself said, now that the U.S. took out Maduro, the U.S. is going to run Venezuela, which is an interesting topic, because what does he mean by that exactly? Well, we'll get into that in a second. He said that the U.S. is going to make sure that the oil flows, back to kind of the rates that it used to, when it was far more than the current 1 million barrels a day, and it was, up and above 3 million a day many years ago, back when Chavez was still in power. And it'll be very interesting to see what plays out with the whole situation there, right? In terms of like how much oil will actually be flowing, what the revenues will be like for the companies, what kind of taxes they will pay, how the splits will go between Venezuela and the US. But at the moment, there is a weird situation because the person that controls Venezuela at the moment, the interim acting president, if you will, is Maduro's own vice president, who has had a cabinet meeting in which she said that Venezuela is basically not going to bend the knee, that they're not going to allow themselves to be ruled by America, that they're going to basically resist. And she obviously made, I say obviously because as an Israeli, this is something we hear all the time, she made the obvious trope against Israel and against Jews, saying that the capture of Maduro had, quote, tinges of Zionism, right? Alluding to, obviously, the Jews controlling the world and the Jews controlling America and all that kind of nonsense. And the only reason that anybody would even say such a thing is because very obviously, they're going to use anti-Semitic tropes to try to, discredit the actions of the Americans by basically blaming the Jews, which is like the oldest trope in the book, So nobody should be surprised by that. That is honestly the easiest and dumbest playbook that exists on Earth. It has been going around for thousands and thousands of years. Just blame everything on the Jews, and that's exactly what the current acting president of Venezuela has said. And he's made it very clear, Trump, that is, he made it very clear that if she does not cooperate with the U.S. doing what it has to do to make Venezuela safe and to restore its democracy with the rightful president, who really should be Machado, right? Who, yes, she was forced to drop out of the election last time, but the person that replaced her on the ticket basically won, and Maduro only kept power because he cheated. But Machado is really the person that the people of Venezuela want to be their president. Well, Trump has said very clearly that if they don't respect that, if they try to fight against the U.S., that he's going to hit them again and even harder. So nobody should be surprised to see more attacks on Venezuela, on its military specifically, if they refuse to respect the will of the Venezuelan people. So it's not quite over necessarily. If the people in Venezuela do not get the leader that they voted for, it's not quite over. If Machado is not able to come to power fairly quickly. But again, the U.S., according to Trump, currently rules Venezuela. And when he was asked about that, he said that a group of people, without specifying who, would ensure that it is ruled by the U.S. Again, he did not specify who. He did not specify they're already doing it. There are reports that the U.S. is in control of various ports in Venezuela, meaning the ones that export oil. So if that's the case, that means that there are actually potentially U.S. troops on the ground making sure that those ports operate differently than they have until now to ensure their flow of oil or their shipments of oil are unhindered and going to where they're supposed to go, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's the long and short of it for you. What's going to happen next? Everybody's eyes are on Iran, Tehran, and trying to see whether or not Khamenei will be the next dictator to be ousted. He has also been given many chances, and is still being given the chance to, basically go into peaceful retirement if he wants to. And it's just a matter of will he or won't he? Right now, it looks like he won't. Right now, it looks like he does not want to give up any amount of power. He does not want to go into retirement. And he wants to suppress the protesters, exactly as I told you he would do, because we're seeing an increasing number of violence against the protesters. And as I told you, if you don't get 3 to 5 million, a minimum of 3 million, but 3 to 5 would be good to actually come out and protest and overrun the people of the military. You're going to have a huge problem, because it basically means that the military in Iran, which is more than like 1.3 or 1.8 million people in total, will be able to just use their force and squash the protesters, even though you have occasionally here and there some people doing some things, where they successfully hit an IRGC vehicle or personnel or whatever. The bottom line is the people are not significantly armed, and there is no way they are going to be able to win against the IRGC if they don't have significant numbers in the streets. And anybody saying that Israel has to help them to do this and the US has to help them to do this, listen, Israel and the US may be able to help with specific targets, and maybe they're able to help with a tiny amount of supplies, well, Israel anyway, but the US maybe more significantly, but still not enough to just overrun the IRGC with US weapons. The people on the ground have to do this. There really is no other way. I wish there were, but there isn't. So that's what I have to say about that. And for now, the best you can really hope for, right, being realistic, is that we will get a significant amount of people in Iran willing to come out, from the middle classes as well as the poor classes. Right now it's mostly poor classes doing that, and they'll come out and they will do what they have to do to literally overrun the IRGC and the government of Iran. Until that happens, nothing's going to change in Iran. I hate to tell it to you like that, but it's just true. And I've been telling you guys this since many, many, many months and years, right? Even back, if you remember back in June, I told you it's very disappointing that the war in Iran ended as quickly as it did in 12 days, but without the masses of numbers necessary to actually overrun the government, there's really nothing that's going to happen, and nothing is going to change anytime soon. So I hope that I'm wrong. I hope the people in Iran will show me that I'm wrong by stepping up and overthrowing the government there, the evil dictatorship there, the Islamic dictatorship, and its IRGC. But for now, my unfortunate predictions of being slightly skeptical and holding back my excitement, right? Saying, oh, I wish they'd do it this time. I do wish they'd do it this time, but I'm not losing sleep over it, because we've seen this too often in the past 47 years. That's going to do it for now. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Help me get the word out. Appreciate it. We'll see you guys in the next one. Peace. Shalom.